Well, science has proved what those of us with a brain already knew, that liberals' brains are defective. In the PBS documentary series, The Brain, hosted by David Eagleman, he visits a leading neuroscientist at the Neuroimaging Lab at Virginia Tech's Research Institute, who says with a 95% accuracy rate, he can determine whether someone is a liberal or a conservative from a simple brain scan.
Montague has found a link between a person's politics and one basic reaction: disgust. He has volunteers go into an MRI scanner where they look at a series of images.
I show them somebody with a knife to somebody else's throat, physically threatening stimulus, a dead corpse, something that was gross, like flies on a salad or something like this. These things elicit responses in your nervous system, and we record their brain activity.
Oh, you know what's coming next, and it makes perfect sense. When normal people see something disgusting, they feel disgusted. When liberals see something disgusted, they feel nothing because their brains are defective and they have no conscience.
And they go into a booth and they answer a political ideology survey. How do you feel about gun control, abortion, premarital sex, things like that?
Montague's results are striking. The greater the disgust response in the brain, the more conservative the person is likely to be. A smaller response correlates with a more liberal outlook.
Think about how profound this discovery is. When liberals see something that should disgust any human being, they feel nothing. They feel like it's totally normal, and they see nothing wrong with it.
The shocking part is that your response to a single disgusting image can predict your score on that test with 95% accuracy.
Look at how freaked out this guy looks because of his discovery. He probably realizes the implications that liberals' brains are so defective that they don't have the normal defense mechanisms that would repel them from disgusting, horrific things. As you know, it's pretty much the opposite with liberals. They're disgusted and repelled by normal things like families and jobs and beautiful women. They're so confused they don't even know whether they should be wearing work boots or a skirt, and they spend their free time trying to come up with new genders. This fits in with other research like the American Journal of Political Science, which determined that liberals, of course, tend to be psychotic. And a study by the University of California and the University of Utah, conducted in 16 different countries, shows that conservatives feel that they have more meaning and purpose in their lives than liberals, who, of course, are miserable. Well, it's no wonder since they shun traditional family values, personal responsibility, every American holiday, our entire heritage, and everything that makes life worth living. And another shocker, I know, science has proved that conservatives are more attractive than liberals. This from Psychology Today. Science weighs in, and conservatives do look better. The doctor who wrote this article even felt bad about reporting it, saying, quote, "I feel cheap writing this. This reeks of clickbait, but I can't help it. Science can be provocative too." 2 research articles suggest that conservatives tend to be more physically attractive than political liberals. Of course. And all of this was the inspiration behind my liberals versus conservatives shirt, which gives an X-ray view into the minds of the average liberal versus the average conservative. Order yours from markdice.com or click the link in the description below. It's available in t-shirt, long sleeve, and hoodie, like all of my shirts, and a whole bunch of different colors. And you can get 15% off of any shirt at markdice.com with the promo code DICE15 at the checkout through this Friday. Your purchase helps keep this channel going, so thanks for all your support, guys. And the shirts make a great Christmas gift, obviously, so pick them up soon so you can make sure to get them in time. Check back tomorrow for a new report, and I will see you soon. On Monday, Apple CEO Tim Cook was given the first ever Courage Against Hate Award by the Jewish ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, for his censorship efforts. And during his acceptance speech, he announced that tech companies are committing a sin by not censoring more people and more content from their platforms.
Perhaps most importantly, It drives us not to be bystanders as hate tries to make its headquarters in the digital world. At Apple, we believe that technology needs to have a clear point of view on this challenge. There is no time to get tied up in knots. That's why we only have one message for those who seek to push hate, division, and violence. You have no place on our platforms. You have no home here. From the earliest days of iTunes to Apple Music today, we have always prohibited music with a message of white supremacy.
But rap music about killing cops, dealing drugs, and committing a variety of other crimes is perfectly fine. Songs by notorious criminals like Snoop Dogg, Eminem, and Tekashi 69 are welcomed on the platform with open arms.
Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And as we showed this year, we won't give a platform to violent conspiracy theorists on the App Store.
Of course, he's talking about Alex Jones, and earlier in the ceremony, the presenter of the award highlighted the reasons for having Tim Cook there, and one of them was for banning Alex Jones. I'm sorry, Tim, I must have missed the podcast where Alex Jones was calling for violence.
Why? Because it's the right thing to do. My friends, if we can't be clear on moral questions like these, then we've got big problems.
Oh, you got big problems, all right.
At Apple, we are not afraid to say that our values drive our curation decisions.
Your Silicon Valley
and
values.
Why should we be?
Your perverted,
doing what's
atheistic,
right,
cultural Marxist
creating
values.
Experiences free from violence and hate. Experiences that empower creativity and new ideas.
New liberal ideas.
It's what our customers want us to do.
We want you to stop censoring people.
Technology should be about human potential. It should be about optimism. And we believe the future should belong to those who use
George Orwell's 1984 as an instruction manual? He goes on to say that it's a sin to not censor more people who are being divisive. What sort of divisions are these terrible people sowing, you may ask? Well, according to the ADL, who gave him this award, it's celebrating things like Mother's Day and Father's Day. In this guide they published for elementary schools, they say, quote, if you're going to commemorate Mother's and Father's Day, consider making the day more general, like Family Day or Parent or Guardian Day, to make it more inclusive. Oh, it gets even worse. Quote, as a school, evaluate the messages you convey through language, policies, and procedures. Rethink forms, permission slips, and other procedures that explicitly ask for mother and father identifying information. Instead, change these designations to parent or guardian across the board. In talking with children, use terms like parents and guardians or adult family members rather than mothers and fathers. Think carefully and find alternatives to father-daughter dances and similar activities. I mean, what's next? Are they going to try to ban people from talking about traditional families? Oh wait, what's this? In discussions about family, actively discourage the concept of a traditional, average, or normal family. Work to broaden children's definition of family, emphasizing that family is not based on structure or specific members, but rather living arrangements, love, sharing home responsibilities, and common activities and traditions. Yes, if you simply say that it's better for a child to be raised in a home with a mother and a father, that's sowing division now, according to the ADL and Silicon Valley titans like Tim Cook. We're literally at the point where YouTube is now removing videos and issuing community guideline strikes on channels for criticizing parents who dress up their young boys as drag queens, or as they call them, drag kids, and take them to drag queen festivals, because that's hateful. First Amendment lawyer Harmeet Dillon responded to Tim Cook's call for more censorship, saying that the tech companies that discriminate based on viewpoint should have no protection under the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, because they are publishers, not neutral platforms. What she's talking about is Section 230 grants immunity to all tech companies for any civil or criminal violations that the users may commit by using the platform, because it's essentially a public square. News and editorial outlets do not have that same protection because they're the ones deciding what to put on their platforms, so they're the ones who are liable for it. In other words, you can't have it both ways. They shouldn't be able to claim immunity for what people are posting on their platforms if they're the ones who are deciding what is posted on those platforms. In fact, when Twitter first started, their motto was that they were the free speech wing of the free speech party. But my, how things have changed. Hey, Jack Dorsey.
But certainly, you know, this quote around free speech wing of the free speech party was never a mission of the company. It was never a descriptor of the company that we gave ourselves. It was a joke because of how people found themselves in the spectrum.
But it was a joke that people took seriously, and their respect for you increased because of it at the time.
Well, that was before we realized that conservatism was going to spread so fast and far through the internet, so we decided we had to start censoring them to stop it. We're about this close from Amazon banning books, and I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future, one or all of my books are completely removed from the platform entirely because they're just too divisive. At this point, Tim Cook's probably going to pull Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer from iTunes before Christmas for perpetuating gender norms and being too divisive. Not to mention the economic censorship through mass demonetization that I've been experiencing on YouTube for the last year and a half. So big thanks to all you guys who sponsor my channel through Patreon and tip me through PayPal, and all you guys who get my shirts and my books. I appreciate your support. And with Christmas coming up, they'd make some great gifts. So you may want to go to markdice.com or click the link in the description below, head over to my online store, get someone on your list, the classic Liberalism Find a Cure shirt, or one of my presidential collections, or the Free Speech Zone shirt, all sorts of cool stuff over there. So thanks again for your support. Check back tomorrow for a new report, and I will see you soon. The liberal media is very disappointed that President Trump is not taking some new report on climate change seriously enough.
And start to do something about it, and governments have started to do something about it for some time now. I read that New Yorker article today, and I thought, gosh, how pointless is my life, and how pointless are the decisions that I'm making on a day-to-day basis when we are not focused on climate change every day, when it's not leading every one of our newscasts.
Well, Katie, you will find on all local news broadcasts at the end of the show, usually right before sports, they do have a weather report. But you are right about one thing. Ever since you started working for MSNBC, your life has become pointless. Last night there was a climate change town hall, which included actress Shailene Woodley, Bernie Sanders, and Alexandria Crazy Eyes Cortez, where she made this absurd comparison.
This is going to be the great society, the moonshot, the civil rights movement of our generation. That is the scale. That is the scale of the ambition that this movement is going to require.
Bernie Sanders is like, is my hearing aid working properly? Did this woman really just compare climate change to the civil rights movement? Yes, she did. And she also said that congressmen get paid a living wage, and it's unfair that their staff and interns don't. The set salary for members of Congress is $174,000 a year, or almost $500 a day, 365 days a year. Or as most Americans would call, living high off the hog. I'm just getting paid a tiny living wage of $174,000 a year. This country sucks. Meanwhile, Alexandria has released her new energy plan, which she hopes to implement once she's sworn into Congress in January, in hopes of reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
It's not just possible that we will create jobs and economic activity by transitioning to renewable energy, but it's inevitable that we are going to create jobs. It's inevitable that we're going to create industry. And it's inevitable that we can use the transition to 100% renewable energy as the vehicle to truly deliver and establish economic, social, and racial justice in the United States of America.
Oh, what's that, Arnold? You wanted to add something to the insanity?
I wish that I could be the Terminator in real life, to be able to travel back on time and to stop all fossil fuels when they were discovered.
Sounds like that would have been great for civilization, Arnold, because who needs things like the combustion engine or electricity? Oh, and speaking of new carbon taxes, I heard they're going over real well in France. Let's take a look at the latest.
What's driving the forces behind these protests?
Rena, it started with a new tax on gasoline, and the French said, look, this is enough. Gas has already gone up this year. We can't afford more. But it has become much more. It's become a general discontent with what is seen as continuing rising taxes, which are making the cost of living just very high. They feel their wages are not keeping track with these rises in taxes, and their salaries are just not following.
So you're saying that socialism on top of extra carbon taxes is ruining people's standards of living? What a surprise. It seems every year the global warming alarmists forecast even more dire consequences if we don't pay carbon taxes to the government to save the planet. I, for one, support global warming because I hate cold weather, especially shoveling snow. Check back tomorrow for a new report, and I will see you soon. Democrat Senator Cory Booker, Mr. Potato Head's twin brother, put on some hilarious political theater at the confirmation hearing for Brett Kavanaugh, who will be our new conservative Supreme Court Justice in just a few weeks. Booker pretended to risk expulsion from the Senate, throwing away his entire political career in order to release some secret documents about Brett Kavanaugh, even comparing himself to Spartacus, the Roman gladiator who helped lead a slave revolt against the Roman Empire. But wait until you see exactly what those documents were. Take it away, Senator.
I knowingly violated the rules that were put forth, and I'm told that the committee confidential rules have knowing consequences. And so, sir, I come from a long line, as all of us do as Americans, and understand what that kind of civil disobedience is, and I understand the consequences. So I am right now, before your process is finished, I'm going to release the email about racial profiling. And I understand that the penalty comes with potential ousting from the Senate. And if Senator Cornyn believes that I violated Senate rules, I openly invite and accept the consequences of my team releasing that email right now.
Senator Potato Head really wanted people to understand that he was risking his entire career by releasing the documents, so he repeated himself 3 times, something that didn't go unnoticed by the chairman.
Can I ask you? Can I ask you how long you're going to say the same thing 3 or 4 times?
No, sir.
How long do you want?
I'm saying I'm knowingly violating the rules.
Okay.
Senator Cornyn called me out for it.
How many times are you going to tell us
sir,
that?
I'm saying right now that I'm releasing committee confidential documents.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, we heard you the first 4 times. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I will say that I did willingly violate the chair's rule on the committee confidential process. I take full responsibility for violating that, sir. And I violate it because I sincerely believe that the public deserves to know this nominee's record. In this particular case, his record on issues of race and the law. And I could not understand, and I violated this rule knowingly, why these issues should be withheld from the public. Now, I appreciate the comments of my colleagues. This is about the closest I'll probably ever have in my life to an I am Spartacus moment. My colleagues...
Your Democrat colleagues couldn't possibly be as insane as you, because those confidential documents, Brett Kavanaugh's emails, were already cleared for release. So you risked absolutely nothing by releasing them. What's even more hilarious is that the emails from Brett Kavanaugh about racial profiling prove that he's against it.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
Of course, the liberal media and the resistance treated Potato Head like he was a hero. This from TMZ. Cory Booker releases racial profiling info on Brett Kavanaugh. I'm sorry, TMZ, but obviously you didn't read that info because, like I said, he is against it. You should subscribe to my channel if you're new here because I know you're going to love it. In other news, can you guess what's happening over at CNN? There's only 3 options, of course. Russia, Sloppy Daniels, or...
The reason he's not fit for office is that he's mentally unstable, that he's a deeply disturbed guy. The bottom line is this guy is not stable, he's not logical, he's not rational, and he is indeed, as you say, unfit to be president.
Let me say, with regards to what's in the Woodward book, right? These claims about how his aides think he's a threat to the country, a threat to national security. Do you feel that that's new? Meaning, has Woodward uncovered anything new here? Or when you read the excerpts, were you kind of wondering, hey, what's the fuss?
Well, no, it's a big fuss when the people who are around him and dealing with him every day and fully support his policies nonetheless say he's unfit for office. That is a huge piece of news, and it ought to be of real interest to anybody who is sitting on the fence about whether, if they believe in his policies, it is worth supporting him.
Oh, so even if you support what he's doing and support his policies, you still can't support him because he's mentally unfit for office. Of course, most liberals today are mentally unfit to have passed beyond the 3rd grade, which is why we're trying to find a cure for the liberal pathogen. So I hope you go to markdice.com or click the link in the description below to get yourself a Liberalism Find a Cure t-shirt, long sleeve or hoodie, and support the cause. I'm Mark Dice, thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel here if you're new. Check back tomorrow for a new report, and I will see you soon. Well, what do we have here? Twitter is so liberal that its conservative employees don't feel safe to express their opinions, admits the CEO Jack Dorsey. Well, but CNN says that it's a false claim that big tech is silencing conservatives. While the liberal mainstream media will never report on his admission, he did say this to Recode Media during an interview on their podcast. And Recode's a pretty popular organization. They're the ones who hosted that historic interview with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. They always have the red chairs. So it wasn't a small podcast. But I'm sure little Brian Stelter and Oliver Darcy know what's happening inside of Twitter better than the CEO. And you may recall that it was just a few weeks ago that dozens of conservative Facebook employees finally united and began speaking out on their internal messaging system about how intolerant the liberal culture is within Facebook. And let's not forget that just last week, we got an entire hour-long leaked video from a Google staff meeting with all their top executives, some of them literally in tears, just days after the 2016 election, as they spent the entire meeting talking about what they were going to do. And it was just yesterday that we learned that Google employees discussed tweaking the search results in order to counter President Trump's travel ban. Google employees brainstormed ways to alter search functions to counter the Trump administration's controversial 2017 travel ban, the Wall Street Journal reported on Thursday, citing internal emails. The Google employees proposed ways to leverage search functions and take steps to counter what they consider to be Islamophobic, algorithmically biased results for search terms like Islam, Muslim, Iran, blah, 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 Mexico, Hispanic, etc., etc. And the Data and Society Research Institute just released a 60-page report on conservative YouTubers who they have dubbed the Alternative Influence Network that they say are adopting techniques of brand influencers to build audiences and, quote, sell them political ideologies. And of course, this alternative influencer network is breeding right-wing radicalism. Their report includes this chart. And I'm serious, this is really the chart in their report showing all the different connections between a bunch of different YouTubers who have all collaborated with each other or done interviews with each other. The graph is a partial representation of collaborative connections within the Alternative Influence Network, the AIN as they call it, a network of controversial academics, media pundits, and internet personalities who use YouTube to promote a range of political positions, from mainstream versions of libertarianism and conservatism to overt white nationalism. While collaborations can sometimes consist of debates and disagreements, they more frequently indicate social ties, endorsements, and advertisements for other influencers. Surprisingly, I'm not even in this mess, even though I have more subscribers and more daily viewers than pretty much all of these people. Probably because liberals don't have a sense of humor, so they don't really get me. Maybe I should start doing interviews with other YouTubers. And with my book coming out a week after the midterms, that might be a good time to start. Seriously, I'm really disappointed that this research institute doesn't think that I'm important enough to be a YouTube influencer. And the whole point of their research project is that these YouTubers are responsible for radicalizing people. First you watch Joe Rogan, then you hop over to Jordan Peterson, and then you go right over into white nationalist land. Of course, they weren't going to be satisfied with just removing Alex Jones from YouTube. They're coming for all conservatives. This is from Variety. How YouTube's far right is using classic influencer tactics to promote its views. Political extremists are using YouTube to monetize their toxic ideas. Conservatism is toxic now. The Alternative Influence Network report also recommends that YouTube ban channels from even interviewing certain people, saying, quote, the platform should not only assess what channels say in their content, but also who they host and what their guests say. In a media environment consisting of networked influencers, YouTube must respond with policies that account for influence and amplification. Oh, we're sorry, only mainstream media channels can interview controversial people, not regular YouTubers. It's getting pretty crazy, guys, and it's only going to get worse as the midterms approach, and then as the 2020 election approaches. They're going to be doing everything that they can to try to shut us down. At this rate, I wonder if they're going to ban my new book, which is hopefully coming out a week after the midterms. I'll give you guys an update as the release date gets a little bit closer. So thanks to everyone who supports this channel, all you guys who sponsor me through Patreon and tip me through PayPal. Couldn't do this without you. If you guys enjoy these videos and want to support the channel, go to markdice.com and check out my awesome shirts. Just released this new JFK Trump shirt. All sorts of other cool stuff over there. Coffee mugs available too with all those designs. And you can get any one of them in a t-shirt, long sleeve hoodie, pretty much a variety of different colors as well. So thanks again for all your support. Click the link in the description below. It'll take you to the store. Have a great weekend, guys. Check back on Monday for a new report. And hopefully, I will see you soon.
A story was published today about a woman who was in the subway in London when a man approached her screaming, threatening to attack her, and then he attacked her, seemingly for no reason. Now, this woman is upset because she said two white men who looked like they were in their 50s refused to help her, refused to intervene, and then actually got up and left the subway cart. I keep hearing stories about men who refuse to intervene to protect women and children, and so I started wondering, is this actually a recurring trend? Is this actually getting worse, where men are no longer going to step in to protect people? And if it is, what's actually causing it? Before we get started, head over to youtube.com/TimCastNews for my live stream channel. If any breaking news happens, I will be live here, and I will also have periodic live streams talking about news and other issues. There will be a button right here that you can click to subscribe. And if you really want to support my work, go to patreon.com/TimCast and click Become a Patron and give whatever you are comfortable giving to help support my work. It is all greatly appreciated. From the Daily Mail, fashion chief executive who was attacked by 6-foot Northern Line tube passenger slams two white middle-class men after they walked into next carriage and left her to defend herself. Tamara Sinchik was kicked and threatened while traveling to a business meeting in central London yesterday. The mother of one told Mail Online children were crying as the agitated man squared up to her and started violently attacking her in the middle of the carriage. Recounting the incident, she said, "I got on the tube at Highgate and I was going to Old Street. A man got on an archway. He was about 6 foot and around 30 to 35 years old, and he just started screaming. At first, I thought he was some sort of performance artist, but then it became clear that he was not well. He was screaming and shouting at me, saying things like, 'I am going to effing kick you.' Then he did actually kick me. It was intimidating. He was a big guy, and I am only size 8. The fashion CEO is keen to stress she does not blame this man, who she believes needs medical help, but said the incident was terrifying. Instead, She is upset that two men she describes as white and middle class chose not to help and move to another carriage. I remain more angry with those white middle class men who left me to it. As fathers, husbands, and sons, they should be ashamed of themselves. Miss Sinchik praised those who came to her aid as angels, saying an Eastern European man who had seen the guy on the platform had worked his way down the train as he felt that man was dangerous, and he got to me when the train stopped. She said her message to those who left her was, "You are cowards with less empathy and strength than 2 size 8 women and a Greek female pensioner. Shame on you. If you were so scared is one thing, but one of you had a briefcase and could have helped me, and both of you could have pulled the cord from the safety of the next carriage that you left me for. I would never in my life do that." First, I'd like to point out that I find it interesting that she actually blames the 2 men who weren't involved over the man who actually attacked her. Simply because someone seems like they might need medical help doesn't absolve them of their own personal responsibilities, though I understand not holding anyone at fault for the incident. I also am curious as to why these 2 men got up and refused to help. So I started looking into other stories. And it turns out there might be a trend, or at least the perception of a trend, of those who seek to help others being punished for doing so. One of the first stories I found is from the Telegraph. Good Samaritan jailed for 6 years for punching drug dealer who attacked a woman. Carl Neal jailed for punching violent drug dealer who was not prosecuted for a violent attack on a woman, which triggered the confrontation. A Good Samaritan who stepped in and punched a violent drug dealer who was attacking a young woman has been jailed for 6 years. Father of one, Carl Neal, was jailed after felling a violent drug dealer with a single punch after he helped a young woman who was being attacked in the street. Mr. Neal, 23, intervened when he saw the woman being punched and pinned against a car bonnet. Mr. Neal shouted at the dealer, who was owed a 40-pound debt by the woman, to leave the woman alone, and then knocked him down with one punch. He hit the drug dealer again before walking away from the scene. The dealer was left fighting for his life, with doctors removing a portion of his skull to allow his brain to swell. He was put into an induced coma, while surgeons fought to treat numerous brain bleeds and multiple facial fractures. Eventually, his condition improved, and he has since been released from the hospital, but doctors warn that he will continue to suffer with fatigue, memory loss, and anxiety attacks. The drug dealer's injuries were so horrific, he was not prosecuted for his violent attack on the woman that provoked the altercation. As well as the grievous bodily harm charge, which he admitted, Neal was also sentenced for the offenses of dangerous driving, assault with intent to resist arrest, and driving whilst disqualified, committed last January, and attempted burglary, aggravated vehicle taking, and driving whilst disqualified, committed last August. It would appear that this story is a tad bit biased. This person has a previous list of charges, and the reason he got 6 years is probably because of unrelated incidents to this. However, the prosecution does accept that his intervention contributed to his charges, that he received a grievous bodily harm charge for intervening to protect a woman who was being attacked. Now, I don't know the full details of this incident, and it's possible this man Carl Neal overstepped the boundaries of what's reasonable in trying to defend this woman. But when this story comes out and people hear stories like this, it's no surprise that many people don't want to get involved in a confrontation. It's not just about intervening to protect another person from attack, it's about protecting yourself or protecting children. In this story, a man saw an overturned vehicle and rushed to save the woman's life and helped her start breathing. An officer told him to move his truck, but he refused to leave this woman's side because he feared she might die, and he did have medical training. Eventually, the police arrested the man. Or how about this story from Miami? A man helped a lost toddler, police say. He was then smeared online as a predator. A man trying to help a lost toddler find her parents was misidentified as a kidnapper on social media over the weekend, according to police in Lakeland, Florida, prompting him to leave town in fear for his safety and the safety of his family. The citizen attempted to ask the girl where her parents were and walked with her in hopes she could point them out, the statement said, a fact verified by at least one independent witness. At that point, bystanders told the parents the man was attempting to kidnap the child. As the two were nearing the playground, 3 men approached them from behind, Patch reported. One man grabbed the girl, and the other man, who was the child's father, punched the man 5 or 6 times. I thought he was trying to take my daughter, the girl's father told News Channel 8. Police concluded that the man was only trying to help. We had an independent eyewitness that saw him walking around asking, "Is this your parents? Is that your father?" Sergeant Gary Gross of the Lakeland Police Department told Fox 13 News. The father and his friends were not satisfied with the man's explanation or that of the police. So I guess in Lakeland, you can kidnap a child and get away with it, the father said to police, local media reported. It's not so easy to come to the defense of someone when you can be mistaken as the perpetrator. When people talk about the idea of a good guy with a gun in the United States, one of the things that's brought up in the debate is that the police won't know who the good guy or the bad guy is. Think about it this way. Someone starts shooting with a handgun, and the good guy with the gun draws their handgun and orders them to stop. When the police approach the scene, they simply see two people with handguns shooting at each other. So let's go back to the original story. This woman was being attacked. Well, if those men intervened and a police officer walked in, he would simply see two men fighting with each other, and it's probable both of the men would be arrested. There's no easy solution to this. And then going to the last story I just talked about, a man who actually tried to help a little girl was branded a pervert and actually physically attacked by the girl's father. Heading now to Australia, we see this story. Most men are reluctant to help lost kids, worried they will be called a pervert, new research shows. Disturbing new research from Pure Profile reveals 23% of fathers would shy away from assisting a child in need because they might be perceived as having suspect motives. Another 45% of dads admit it would cross their minds that someone might interpret their actions as inappropriate. But if a child was in great distress, they would go to their aid. This study found that the majority of men are worried about being misidentified as someone malicious if they tried to help a child, and at least a quarter of the men would refuse to help children out of the fear of being identified as a criminal. And in the UK, we had the famous story from this year. Pensioner, 78, arrested for murder after stabbing burglar to death in his own home. A pensioner has been arrested after a suspected burglar was killed during a violent tussle at his home. The 78-year-old was held on suspicion of murder after the 38-year-old died of his wounds in the hospital in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Police said the struggle broke out after the pensioner, named locally as Richard Osborne Brooks, found two men inside his home in South Park, Hither Green, South London, shortly after midnight. One of the burglars, who was armed with a screwdriver, forced the homeowner into his kitchen while his accomplice went upstairs. Detectives believe a struggle then took place between one of the males and the homeowner, and the 38-year-old intruder was stabbed in the upper body. He was later found collapsed in nearby Further Green Road by paramedics from London Ambulance Service, who took him to a central London hospital where he died at 3:37 a.m. Police were unable to confirm whether the suspect had been stabbed with the screwdriver. The second suspect fled the scene before police arrived and is now being hunted by the Met's Homicide and Major Crime Command. Gordon Williams, a local resident, said, "I could hear people moaning in the street and just thought it was someone drunk. I saw the body laid in the street and another guy jump in a van and leave." These stories are not difficult to come by. People are increasingly worried about even defending themselves in some parts of the world, and people are reluctant to help children and women in the instance of violence because it's possible they will be punished for it. However, I don't want people to think that I'm actually saying it is more likely you will be punished than not, because certainly it is much easier to find a story about a Good Samaritan who was cherished as a hero for intervening to save someone's life. In this story, we can see a man saved an old woman's life and was brought to tears by an incredible surprise. A Navy veteran was heading to the gym when he saw a purse snatcher try to rob a 76-year-old woman in a parking lot in Florida. The 24-year-old man heroically ran over, chased the alleged robber, and held him down until police arrived. After Ellen DeGeneres caught wind of his incredible actions, she invited him onto the show to tell his story. But of course, she had plenty of surprises in store for him. Ellen brought in this man's mother, they hugged on TV, and she gave him a check for $10,000 to help pay for college. So there are stories of positive results when someone intervenes to help someone else. But I don't find it unreasonable that people are refusing to step up to defend others because, for one, I'm sure a lot of people just don't want to be involved in a confrontation. But there are just too many stories about people being punished for trying to do something good. If you intervene and accidentally hurt or kill someone, you can be charged criminally for the damage you inflict. And if you don't know how much force to apply, or a court decides you applied too much force, you can be punished. In this instance, the two men walking away probably did the safest thing for them. By not defending this woman, they probably saved themselves a huge hassle and potential criminal charges. So let me wrap up the whole point of this video. Again, I don't think you are more likely to be punished than you are to be rewarded. I believe in most instances, if you step in to help defend someone, you'll probably be thanked, complimented. A lot of people will be grateful that you did this. but there are just too many stories we're hearing about individuals who get punished for trying to do just that. In fact, now we have a story of two men being shamed because they didn't want to intervene. The woman in this story is more upset at the two men than she is the guy who actually attacked her. So let me know what you think in the comments below. We saw the study about how men were reluctant to help lost children and worried about being identified as a criminal. We heard the story about a man who was actually attacked and smeared online as a criminal for trying to help a little girl. We heard the story about a man who is facing prison time because he intervened to help a woman, and now we're hearing that this woman is angry at these men for not wanting to step up. So what do you think? Should we stand up and defend those in need, or should we take care of ourselves? Comment below. We'll keep the conversation going. You can follow me on Twitter at TimCast. Stay tuned. New videos every day at 4 p.m. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.
The Necessity of Chivalry by C.S. Lewis. The word chivalry has meant, at different times, a good many different things, from heavy cavalry to giving a woman a seat in a train. But if we want to understand chivalry as an ideal distinct from other ideals, if we want to isolate that particular conception of a man comme il faut, which was the special contribution of the Middle Ages to our culture, we cannot do better than turn to the words addressed to the greatest of all the imaginary knights in Malory's Morte d'Arthur. "Thou wert the meekest man," says Sir Ector to the dead Lancelot. "Thou wert the meekest man that ever ate in hall among ladies, and thou wert the sternest knight to thy mortal foe that ever put spear in the rest." The important thing about this ideal is, of course, the double demand it makes on human nature. The knight is a man of blood and iron, a man familiar with the sight of smashed faces and the ragged stumps of lopped-off limbs. He is also a demure, almost a maiden-like guest in hall, a gentle, modest, unobtrusive man. He is not a compromise or happy mean between ferocity and meekness. He is fierce to the nth, and meek to the nth. When Lancelot heard himself pronounced the best knight in the world, he wept as he had been a child that had been beaten. What, you may ask, is the relevance of this ideal to the modern world? It is terribly relevant. It may or may not be practicable. The Middle Ages notoriously failed to obey it, but it is certainly practical. Practical as the fact that men in a desert must find water or die. Let us be quite clear that the ideal is a paradox. Most of us, having grown up among the ruins of the chivalrous tradition, were taught in our youth that a bully is always a coward. Our first week at school refuted this lie, along with its corollary that a truly brave man is always gentle. It is a pernicious lie, because it misses the real novelty and originality of the medieval demand upon human nature. Worse still, it represents, as a natural fact, something which is really a human ideal, nowhere fully attained, and nowhere attained at all without arduous discipline. It is refuted by history and experience. Homer's Achilles knows nothing of the demand that the brave should also be the modest and the merciful. He kills men as they cry for quarter, or takes them prisoner to kill them at leisure. The heroes of the sagas know nothing of it. They are as stern to inflict as they are stubborn to endure. Attila had a custom of fiercely rolling his eyes, as if he wished to enjoy the terror which he inspired. Even the Romans, when gallant enemies fell into their hands, led them through the streets for a show, and cut their throats in cellars when the show was over. At school we found that the hero of the first 15 might well be a noisy, arrogant, overbearing bully. In the last war we often found that the man who was invaluable in a show was a man for whom in peacetime we could not easily find room except in Dartmoor prison. Such is heroism by nature, heroism outside the chivalrous tradition. The medieval ideal brought together two things which have no natural tendency to gravitate towards one another. It brought them together for that very reason. It taught humility and forbearance to the great warrior, because everyone knew by experience how much he usually needed that lesson. It demanded valor of the urbane and modest man, because everyone knew that he was as likely as not to be a milksop. In doing so, the Middle Ages fixed on the one hope of the world. It may or may not be possible to produce by the 1,000 men who combine the two sides of Lancelot's character. But if it is not possible, then all talk of any lasting happiness or dignity in human society is pure moonshine. If we cannot produce Lancelots, humanity falls into two sections: those who can deal in blood and iron but cannot be meek in hall, and those who are meek in hall but useless in battle. For the third class, who are both brutal in peace and cowardly in war, need not here be discussed. When this dissociation of the two halves of Lancelot occurs, history becomes a horribly simple affair. The ancient history of the Near East is like that. Hardy barbarians swarm down from their highlands and obliterate a civilization. Then they become civilized themselves and go soft. Then a new wave of barbarians comes down and obliterates them. Then the cycle begins over again. Modern machinery will not change this cycle. It will only enable the same thing to happen on a larger scale. Indeed, nothing much else can ever happen if the stern and the meek fall into two mutually exclusive classes. And never forget that this is their natural condition. The man who combines both characters, the knight, is a work not of nature but of art, of that art which has human beings instead of canvas or marble for its medium. In the world today there is a liberal or enlightened tradition which regards the combative side of man's nature as a pure atavistic evil, and scouts the chivalrous sentiment as part of the false glamour of war. And there is also a neo-heroic tradition which scouts the chivalrous sentiment as a weak sentimentality, which would raise from its grave, its shallow and unquiet grave, the pre-Christian ferocity of Achilles by a modern invocation. Already in our own Kipling, the heroic qualities of his favourite subalterns are dangerously removed from meekness and urbanity. One cannot quite imagine the adult Stalky in the same room with the best of Nelson's captains, still less with Sidney. These two tendencies between them weave the world's shroud. Happily, we live better than we write, better than we deserve. Lancelot is not yet irrecoverable. To some of us, this war brought a glorious surprise in the discovery that, after 20 years of cynicism and cocktails, the heroic virtues were still unimpaired in the younger generation, and ready for exercise the moment they were called upon. Yet with this sternness there is much meekness. From all I hear, the young pilots in the RAF, to whom we owe our life from hour to hour, are not less but more urbane and modest than the 1915 model. In short, there is still life in the tradition which the Middle Ages inaugurated. But the maintenance of that life depends, in part, on knowing that the knightly character is art, not nature, something that needs to be achieved, not something that can be relied upon to happen. And this knowledge is specially necessary as we grow more democratic. In previous centuries, the vestiges of chivalry were kept alive by a specialized class, from whom they spread to other classes, partly by imitation and partly by coercion. And now, it seems, the people must either be chivalrous on its own resources, or else choose between the two remaining alternatives of brutality and softness. This is, indeed, part of the general problem of a classless society, which is too seldom mentioned. Will its ethos be a synthesis of what was best in all the classes, or a mere pool, with the sediment of all and the virtues of none? But that is too large a subject for the fag end of an article. My theme is chivalry. I have tried to show that this old tradition is practical and vital. The ideal embodied in Lancelot is escapism, in a sense never dreamed of by those who use that word. It offers the only possible escape from a world divided between wolves who do not understand and sheep who cannot defend the things which make life desirable. There was, to be sure, a rumour in the last century that wolves would gradually become extinct by some natural process, but this seems to have been an exaggeration.
The gratitude of every home in our island, in our empire, and indeed throughout the world, except in the abodes of the guilty, goes out to the British airmen who, undaunted by odds, unwearied in their constant challenge and mortal danger, are turning the tide of the world war by their prowess and by their devotion. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.